Annyeonghaseyo, and welcome to the 23rd episode of the I'm Doing Great podcast with your hosts Gina and Mike. And I just wanted to tell everybody before we start, because I think I've forgotten it for the last 20 episodes, but like and subscribe. Hit the bell so that you're notified when we put up new episodes.
Smash that like button.
We're on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all the Spotify. I just came up with a new app. Trademark the name and then send me some money as a cut. We have a lovely guest in the studio today, and because the guest shares races with Gina, I'll have Gina intro him.
Kangmin.
Why'd you have to say it like that? That didn't even sound Korean. That sounded more Chinese.
I know. We were actually he was trying to speak Korean and I was trying to speak it too. I was like, we both sound Chinese right now. This does not at all sound Korean.
환영합니다.
I know how to say 안녕하세요. 잘 먹었습니다. 사랑해요. 할머니. 보고 싶어요. Just like 10 handfuls.
I did Taekwondo for like 10 years.
I did Taekwondo when I was
used to be able
too.
to count to like 1,000.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, that was about it.
Yeah. Anyway, our guest is one of the young-based Christian conservatives online right now. I've been following him for a while. I appreciate his takes on a lot of different things. I think he has a really great perspective on culture and what conservatives need in order to move forward successfully. So welcome to the show and thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's really good to be here. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad to be here because Gina, it's like there's not a lot of Koreans in this space. And so I know you're not full, you're not pure blood, but you know.
I'm one of those halvesies, as Dwight says from The Office.
My wife likes you a lot.
Does she?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
my mom likes you a lot.
Oh, I'm honored.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. A lot of Korean ladies, like older ladies, tend to like me because I'm very polite and I'm very like, you know, well-mannered.
How do I say your name?
Kangmin.
Kangmin. If you like Kangmin, hit the like button.
Smash
if you like Kangmin
button.
too.
Smash it for Kangmin.
Yeah.
We were kind of talking. Were you born and raised in America?
I was born in Korea, but I was raised here. Yeah.
Okay. And how old were you when you moved here?
1.
Okay, so you were so young. Yeah.
Yeah.
Little baby.
But I grew up like only speaking Korean.
I figured.
So when I started school, I had to actually go to ESL because I knew no English.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
My cousins were like that too. My mom was nervous I grew up in California for like the first 5 years of my life. Well, on and off. And then we moved to Georgia when I was like 5 or 6. My mom was a little nervous that I was going to have an accent in school. So we didn't speak Korean at home anymore. So I lost it. So I was wondering, but you live in Georgia.
Currently, yeah.
Okay. How long have you been there?
For like a year now.
Oh,
Yeah.
Not long.
Not long.
So we were talking before the camera started rolling, so I'll let you pick up that conversation. I was asking Kangmin if he is in school right now, and he says he's not. So why don't you tell everybody what you're doing?
Yeah, so I graduated from USC in 2019 from LA. And so that was when I was a little more liberal and mostly apolitical. But then after that, I started to work for a pharmaceutical company. And then I was working there until September of 2021. So very recently. And then I got fired. And I got fired because of my social media posts.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they said it was an egregious policy infraction and a violation of their terms and employee whatever, because I said online that I'm going to fight like hell against the vaccine mandates. And then I also said in another post, I was like, it's a good time to buy firearms if you haven't already. Yeah.
So was it something that your coworkers like brought to your boss and like tattled on you? Because I've heard a lot of stories
No,
like
this
that.
happened after because I was like, I'm like masks, like I tolerated. I was like, you know what, if I have to wear masks at work, whatever, right? Because we had to wear it when we're like walking, but we didn't have to wear it when we're eating, and we didn't have to wear it when we're at our desks. So for the most part, I wasn't even wearing a mask. So I was like, okay, whatever. But they started to flirt with the idea of a vaccine mandate. And then so I said, okay, this is not okay. I'm going to have to say something. So then a lot of the corporate like media, the video calls that they sent out to all the employees and things like that, I left a lot of comments, a lot of questions like, why are you trying to enforce this when literally the CDC director, Rachel Walensky, Fauci, a lot of these people all admitted that, yeah, this does not stop transmission nor infection. Then why do we need to impose this for the safety of our employees? They can never answer it. They always said, oh, that's a good question. You know, I have to look into it. And I'm like, why aren't you considering natural immunity? Here are all these studies, all these peer-reviewed studies that show that natural immunity is more durable, more effective than the jab and all that stuff. And they're like, they would delete the comments and then they would update the caption on the video and say like, oh, please don't leave conspiracy theory or things like that. And then so after that, they obviously found it problematic. They talked to my supervisor, and then my supervisor talked to me, and she was like, hey, like, I know you're concerned about this stuff. Just make sure you're polite and respectful when you say it. I was like, okay, cool. And then a few days later, I get a call from HR, like not only like my local HR, but like HR like high up. And they're like, we're letting you know that your employment is now terminated because you have violated blah, 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 because of your social media posts. So up until that point, I was already posting on social media for over a year about all this stuff, right? And they didn't target me then, and it wasn't a problem then. But then as soon as I started to speak out at my company, that's when they targeted me, and then they made up an excuse that I posed a violent threat to the company when I don't even own a gun. And it's just like, that's what happened. Yeah.
Unbased.
So I need to get one though. I need to get one. I just been kind of lazy.
Now,
you buy one off
sure.
me. So you graduated with a degree in what?
Chemical engineering.
Okay, so you're an idiot. So, and then
Definitely
you
lowest
worked
IQ
for
on
a
the
pharmaceutical company?
I did. And then I
Okay,
got
you don't have
fired.
to name them specifically, but what were you doing for them?
Well, I was actually a part of a program where you like rotate through different locations and
Okay.
different positions, and then after 2 years, you get permanently placed at a location and in a position. And so for the first 9 months, I was actually in Minnesota. I was
Okay.
right outside Minneapolis, and I worked there. And then I moved down to Georgia because that company had a site in Georgia, and so I started to work there. And then lastly, I was probably planning on either going to LA or Boston for my last rotation, but then I got fired before.
And
I got the
what were
chance
you
to.
doing?
Well, the first rotation I was doing process engineering.
Okay.
I won't get too in deep because people probably don't know too much about pharmaceuticals and how that works. But yeah, I was just doing process engineering and working with equipment and things like that. And for my second rotation, I was doing like operational excellence, kind of like more industrial engineering
Okay.
type work, where you try to like identify bottlenecks in the process and try to improve it and
Yeah.
work with other people to do that. It's kind of like project management in a sense as well. So
Okay.
that's what I'm
So
saying.
you're not a doctor.
I'm not a doctor.
So you
and
shouldn't
I'm,
be talking about this stuff, Gina.
and I'm not a
Ill-equipped.
You should have been fired.
I'm not a
Ill-equipped.
biologist.
You
I'm
don't
not
know
a biologist.
anything
Yeah,
about what the vaccine can or can't do because you're not qualified, dude.
that's right. Thank you for speaking out, Mike.
Seriously, no,
Thank
it
you.
rubs me the wrong way when people could just go on Twitter, say whatever they want,
Say
and post
things.
all the facts that they want, and like still you don't care. You don't care about my grandmother, dude.
I don't. I just want. Yeah. I don't care about grandmothers. I just care about myself. Apparently.
all good.
Jeez.
So what are you doing now?
So right now I am just doing content creation, working with different organizations, and doing stuff independently. I'm actually starting to revamp my content on YouTube because there's so many political commentators out there. We don't need more, in my opinion.
Yeah, stop.
But
Yeah.
I think there's one aspect that a lot of people haven't really tuned into is like looking at like culture and understanding why certain films, certain cultural phenomena are very powerful and resonate with so many people, and identifying the Christian and conservative elements in those. Because here's the reality: like no one really cares too much about politics. Most people don't care, but most people do care about culture.
That's right.
And then so this is one thing that conservatives suck at, like leveraging culture and using culture and creating culture to take back the culture, right? So I'm kind of passionate about that. So I'm kind of thinking about, I'll still do a commentary because I think politics and culture are unequivocally intertwined today, especially. But definitely talking about things that I love, like anime and film and Korean dramas, which a lot of conservatives see like, oh, that's so gay and degenerate. But actually, those shows and those that entertainment sphere is actually deeply conservative, and there's a lot of right-wing elements to it, and this is why so many people like it.
Yeah.
And so if we don't tap into that now, then obviously the liberals will take it over, which is kind of what we're seeing already. So I kind of want to leverage that and leverage culture to take back the culture.
Are you talking about like soap operas or like the dramas like what was that last big one on in Korea with the one with the
Squid
red
Game?
light? Yeah, Squid Game.
Yeah.
Game.
Yeah.
Are you talking about like
No,
dramas
no,
like
no.
that?
Yeah. So Korean dramas broadly, just like Korean shows. Yeah.
My dad was telling me about this one show. Is it called like Sunshine or Sunrise? It's about like early 1900s. This guy who is like a Korean guy who's like a major in the U.S. Army goes back to Korea. And I forget the name of it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Outside of Squid Game, and not that Squid Game was even that explicit.
Why did I bring that up if I don't know the name of it?
They don't have sex scenes at all.
Mm-hmm.
They're quite conservative in that sense. Like they barely even have scenes of people kissing in Korean dramas. I don't watch them much, but my mom watches them a lot. And so when I go visit her upstairs, I'll kind of look at what's on the TV, and it's almost always a Korean drama. And she and I will always talk about how it's very, I mean, clean, I guess is kind of the word. It's not raunchy, because I'm at a point now with TV and film where maybe I'm an old lady. I just get really uncomfortable watching people make out on TV. I don't want to watch people kiss their tongues on each other's throats, and the sex scenes. I'm just like, why? I don't need to see that. I don't want to see that.
They're gratuitous. When it's gratuitous and kind of over the top, then it makes me feel that way.
The show Bridgerton, right? I kind of like period pieces like that. I mean, even though it's more of like a fantasy period piece, but it's just so. I'm going through season 1 because season 2 is out now, and it's just so gratuitous and like just a lot of heavy breathing and sex all the time. I'm just like, what? Why? And I think that there's something to be said about the Korean dramas, because there's something happening right now with Korean entertainment, period. K-pop, Korean dramas, Squid Game was massive. And I think there's a lot to be.
They're horror movies.
The last
one I saw was I Saw the Devil.
I
you ever
heard
see
of
that one?
I haven't. It's on my list though. I do want to watch it.
What was the last movie that resonated with you?
I think there's a lot that really resonated with me, but I think what's one that resonated with me? I mean, there's a drama called Crash Landing on You that was really popular a couple years ago, and it's about she's a beauty company CEO, and she's really rich and really big in Korea, and then she goes like paragliding, and then there's like a tornado, and then she lands in North Korea. And then so basically she falls in love with this North Korean soldier, and then it's about this whole like love story, right? But it's like I love that kind of sappy stuff. But the thing that was really, really prominent in that show is that even though she was this boss babe, even though she was this so accomplished career woman, she still became someone who's very deeply reliant on a strong Korean man to provide for her and protect her. And that's a very conservative theme, right?
Very.
And like even in the midst of her boss babe-ness, right? She still like submitted to that man because he was strong and he was courageous and he was loving and tender. And so that's a very right-wing theme that most liberals today in America would look at that and be like, oh, that's patriarchy. But most of them watch that and not knowing that it's patriarchy, they actually like it, because inside a lot of these liberals actually do long for that. It's just they express, because of the fact that they can't actually live that out in their own lives because they have certain inadequacies. They're insecure. They have blue hair and they have all these piercings and everything. Nothing against those things in and of itself, but
red flag.
It's kind of like you see like why these things are so popular, and it's because it's deeply conservative. And this is why even though Netflix and Disney's going super woke, they're not bringing in more revenue. Because no one wants to see that. Like literally most of American entertainment these days is really based around, like you said, sex. Just like making out, having sex all the time. The plot is awful. It doesn't go anywhere. The characters
terrible.
are boring. They're bland. And then it's all about having as much sex as possible, or showing as much wokeness as possible in terms of, racism. Oh, look at this patriarchal, misogynistic. Oh, trans rights, everything like that.
Yeah. Well, I think the early 2000s had a lot of rom-coms that were really popular that had those themes of the woman. She works and she puts on her pantsuit every day, and she's really independent, and she's focused on her work. Movies like 27 Dresses, Sweet Home Alabama.
It's the one with Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds.
The Proposal. I actually really liked that one. That was really cute. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I get that mixed up with.
I love How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
How to Lose a Guy. All of these movies are about women who are super focused on their career and themselves, but then they find a man.
The one with Sarah Jessica Parker leaving the house. And Matthew McConaughey, where like he stays at home.
Failure to Launch.
All
All those movies like that, those are all between 2000 and 2010. They were all very much like that, where it was not a lot of sex, but it was the woman learning how to kind of submit to a man who could protect her and provide for her. And we've totally left those rom-coms behind. Somebody asked me, can you name a good rom-com that came out recently? I'm like, no, because all the rom-coms now they're just trash, and they don't have the same themes that I think women really want to see at the end of the day, which is why all the rom-coms in the early 2000s performed so well. They were huge hits at the box office, and women would they would buy the DVDs and watch them and talk about them all the time. But now we're not seeing that anymore.
Yeah. And I'm kind of thankful for because Korean entertainment is becoming really big in this country, because I mean, the first breakthrough was like Gangnam Style, right?
Yeah.
Which you were playing right before.
I wanted to
started
play
rolling.
it as you walked in, but I know YouTube would give us like they would
A
not
copyright strike.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But it's like growing up, it was always like, are you Chinese or Japanese? You guys know that reference? What show is that from?
Oh,
Right. But
know
like,
that
it's
one.
just like literally every single time someone would meet me, because
know
I
what
lived in a
you're
very diverse, I grew up in a very diverse
Where'd you grow up?
in New Jersey, in Central
Oh,
Jersey.
okay. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Lots of Indians, but also lots of black people, white people, and Mexicans. But they would always be like, are you Chinese or Japanese? And I'd be like, I'm Korean. They're like, what the heck is that? And then now like Korean culture is the most prominent thing in America. But the problem I have with that also is that like, I love that. But at the same time, I don't want Korean culture and entertainment to take over America. What I mean by that is that America should be the one making their own culture,
Yeah,
their
for
own
sure.
entertainment. And the fact that Korean culture and anime is like taking over right now, like everyone's watching it now. It just shows how crappy American entertainment has gotten.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the Oscars.
yeah.
Like, for example, when Parasite was a big thing, the movie, Korean movie, which is a good movie in my opinion. But it already won Best Foreign Film, which is what it should have won. But then it also won the Academy Award for Best Picture.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, the Academy Awards, the Oscars, the Grammys, all these awards are for American music, for American TV shows, for American movies. But the fact that the American movies didn't win the Best Picture just shows us that how much American culture sucks today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
Which is a problem because
Yeah.
we used to be the exporter of culture.
Yeah.
And then now we're importing all this culture because our
That's
culture
right.
sucks. Our entertainment sucks. And that's a huge problem because at a certain point, we won't know what it means to be an American anymore. And being an American meant something before.
What about movies like Minari, which is looks like it comes from a Korean American perspective, where essentially it's about the American dream. Did you see Minari?
I did.
I loved it. I know you liked it.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
It's a good film. Like
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy it so much because I felt like it wasn't resolved. There's no resolution.
Right.
And so that left me very like ugh. But it's a good film because it's about Korean Americans assimilating to America, right? About pursuing their American dream. They
That's
go to
right.
Arkansas, then they have to learn how to be an American.
Yes.
That's what it's about. Like here's the thing, like in every single country around the world, except for maybe like very Western countries, if you move there and if you're not of that country, if you're not from that country, if you immigrate there, you're expected to assimilate. Every single time you're expected to learn the language, the history, the culture, the customs, the etiquette, everything. But then in America, if you say that, you're a bigot, you're a white supremacist, you're a racist or something. It's
No, but we
ridiculous.
don't have culture.
That's the problem. Yeah.
That's the thing.
the
Like,
argument,
we don't
yeah.
have a culture.
Yeah, we talked about this a lot when I was going to say Lord Voldemort, but that's not the right name. When Fic Nuentes was on the show,
Yeah.
we talked about how, same exact thing. And when it comes to the Oscars, you mentioned that a lot of people like to write off when we discuss the Oscars or when we discuss award shows. Or so, who cares what those celebrities do? That's such a boomer thing to say because it is extremely important what Hollywood is doing, what the celebrities are doing, because not only does it affect the country as a whole, but it really affects the younger generation. So anyone who writes off what the celebrities do at the award shows or what movies are winning at the award shows, like they don't understand the power and the impact of culture. And so I think that that's where our attention should be, because you're right. At the end of the day, I don't think anybody really cares about politics. I mean, at the end of the day, we were talking about it. I forgot whose episode it was on, but like, we don't even really pay attention to politics that much. We're not really going through all the bills that are being passed through Congress. Like, we don't really care about politics. What we really care about is culture. And what's the Breitbart phrase? Politics is downstream from culture.
Well,
Yeah.
they turn politics into like pop culture. You know what I mean? You have people outside of the Supreme Court with Ketanji, what's her name?
Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Ketanji.
Ketanji Brown Jackson signs like, we love Ketanji. Like, you don't know who she is.
You have no idea who she is.
She's like some circuit court judge who's been nominated to be a Supreme Court judge. And
No idea.
like they turn them into celebrities. Like
Yeah.
that's what they do. It's
really
it's
do.
Hollywood for ugly people. That's what
AOC too.
DC was always called that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if AOC didn't have heavies and wasn't young, like no one would give a shit about her.
Wasn't she chosen?
Yeah,
as
she
an actress?
literally was chosen out of a reality TV show looking for left-wing, young ideologues to become politicians and to become Congress people.
Right.
Yeah, she was. It was an American Idol of
This is
like
why
of
conservatives lose, because the left understands this. Democrats understand this. The Biden White House understands this, right? And this is the problem conservatives have, because they like so many people have been like crapping on me for the past few days, talking so much about Will Smith and Chris Rock. Yeah. That thing took over the whole country. But then here's the thing. It's like, if you ignore that, then the liberals take that and write their own narratives. And this is why you see them all say white people need to stay out of it because it's a black problem. And so many people are liking those posts, liking those TikToks and all that stuff. But I literally made a TikTok in 5 seconds where Jada Smith was like, I don't care about what people say about my bald head. And I just reacted to saying that, why didn't you tell Will Smith? It took 5 seconds to make. It was on my backup TikTok account with 1 follower. It hit 5 million views today. It went viral.
I saw that one. They had, wow, 5 million.
Yeah, 5 million. And it's like, yeah, like maybe just that one post in and of itself is not gonna make the whole country conservative, but then it's a small process, right? And like if everyone did that, it'd be so influential, because now people are going to my profile and then they're going to my YouTube channel, they're going to my Instagram, they're like, okay, whoa, what is this guy saying? And again, most people aren't political, so most people are on the fence, but because our institutions have been wielded against us, that's why everyone's more left leaning.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if we don't leverage culture, then the liberals do, and this is such a boomer cope take from conservatives and a lot of Christians. They're like, that's so stupid and superficial. We need to stay out of it. We have better things to worry about.
They think they're above it. Like they think they're above it. And I'm like, you are missing the whole conversation. You're so high and mighty. You're so self-righteous that you think you're above the celebrities and culture. It's such an idiotic take, because we're missing out on massive opportunities to shift the culture, shift politics, and most importantly, shift the younger generation.
But what
100%.
do you do? What does one do? How do you retake that culture? How do you contribute to the culture? Because it's one thing to make, that. But it's like, it's one thing to make like these Hallmark type of movies that you see all the time with like some underlying Christian moral value or something like that.
It's too on the nose.
Right. And then it's another thing to do like a movie like Law Abiding Citizen with Gerard Butler, where it's all about, someone's family who's been taken away, and he sees the kind of like woke like justice system, and he tears it apart by actually killing people. And that has like underlying conservative elements to it.
Or Arrival.
Kind of.
Yeah. But that's very conservative to me, because she knew that her daughter, spoiler alert, she knew that her daughter was going to get a rare form of cancer and die, and she still chose to have the daughter anyway. Right.
But if you listen to the author of the original short story, who's the guy that it's part of a book. It's called, I think the author's name is Ted something, but it's part of a book called Stories of Us, a bunch of short stories, and he talks about that from a very not mindset that you have, where there's an underlying like conservative kind of theme to it. He approaches it from a very kind of like woke global warming kind of point of view. I forget his name. Ted Chiang. Yeah, there's a podcast where he talks about writing that short story.
Well, this is why I actually think that movies like that are such a good example, because it's not on the nose. And I think that's what conservatives really, they miss out on. And when they try to do culture, it's so on the nose. Like, what's a good example? I mean, I don't want to give, I don't want to call people out.
What do you think is a good example?
Of something on the nose?
Yeah. Or something that you think could be done by people.
Yeah, because Regis, and we talk about this with Regis all the time.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I think I don't know if you guys know the group Geeks and Gamers. So Geeks and Gamers is a group of people who, do you know who Eric July is?
Yes.
Yeah, he's part of him. They do a bunch of like commentary on entertainment, film, video games, things like that, and they're all super anti-woke.
Right.
But that's not. It's not on the nose. Like that's not their thing. But their thing is like they love video games, they love culture and all that stuff, and then they're able to speak out and integrate their beliefs into everything. And it's not on the nose, because you look at Geeks and Gamers, you don't think, oh, it's conservative, oh, it's anti-woke, oh, it's like political. You look at it, oh, like they talk about games and all that stuff, and then in that they incorporate like being anti-woke and speaking out against the crap, and just talking about how just like leveraging,
just good commentary.
Like for example, they do like a Mario Kart thing every Sunday, and just leveraging that and having a good time and having people come in and then be red pilled through that.
Okay,
I think that's a really good example.
This looks good. I've never seen them before.
Yeah,
This
they're
channel
really
looks
great.
good.
Well, that's happening a lot through like streaming channels and YouTube and stuff like that, where that sort of crowd and that audience is starting to move further and further right.
Yeah,
right? Like,
for example, the quartering. He's also a really good example. I love him. I actually met him on the set of Terror on the Prairie, which is the new Daily Wire film that's coming out with Gina Carano. And he came and I finally got to meet him. I was like, yo, I'm a huge fan of your stuff because he talks about everything. And then so like all his fans are people who love video games, love collectibles, love film, love all those cultural things. But also he talks about like how stupid all this woke nonsense in theater has gotten. And then everyone's like, oh shoot, if they came for the video games, if they came for the shows and the commentary about The Witcher and things like that, and then they see also him talking about, oh, but he's also talking about why Kyle Rittenhouse was actually innocent. And then they're able to be informed in that way and then red pilled in that way. Jeremy's not a conservative, but he is someone who I really deeply respect because he stands for his values and he's not woke. And that's the kind of stuff that we need, where it's not like lame boomer takes and like just forcing like things down your throat. But it's like, it's tactful. And so the liberal takeover of Hollywood and all our institutions was slow. And it started, I would argue, in the late 1900s. And so it's been many years in the coming. And then the reason why they're able to push so hard in the past 7 years is because they had the groundwork already laid out. And then so for us to take back the culture in a way where we win the hearts and minds of our next generation, we have to be active, but also we have to be tactful and wise in how we do it.
Yeah. And I think what we need, and I know people hate this word, but we do need influencers. Because people, they like to write off the TikTok influencers like Addison Rae and people like that because they think they're just vapid, vain idiots with nothing in their head. But those people, Olivia Rodrigo, all of these new Gen Z influencers, Billie Eilish, they have 10 million times more of an impact on your kids than whoever is in the White House, whoever's on the Supreme Court, whoever's in Congress. Like, kids don't care about any of that. They care about who the influencers are. So I think it is really important to have young influencers who can like live in a way online that people will want to emulate, that they'll want to be like them. You know what I mean?
So two things, right? Do we necessarily have to take back culture, or should we just at least try to compete on the same level?
I think everything.
Okay.
Because like here's for example, Elon Musk is talking about like he's like, what should we do about free speech? And everyone's like, buy Twitter. And then a lot of people are just like, make an alternative. I'm like, no, buy Twitter.
You should buy it.
No, 100% buy Twitter.
Make a new one.
Because there's so many new ones and they don't work because liberals don't go. They're just like conservative echo chambers. But for example, that's an example of where it's not necessarily like, I think we have to make alternatives in the meantime just in case. But if the opportunity presents itself, absolutely take over. Absolutely take over and make Twitter a free speech platform like it used to be. And that's how we also win. Where it's like all these conservatives are like this like small government, never wield power, never take over. Like, we have to just make our own stuff, make our own Twitter. I'm like, no. Like, take over if you can. And if the opportunity presents itself, 100% take it over. Like, why don't we want to wield power that already has a lot of influence over our culture and our generation? Then that's why TikTok is so important. And this is why, again, like the Biden White House understands this. This is why they had a roundtable of 30 TikTok influencers. And then they told them to spew White House propaganda. Or, for example, the Nelk Boys having Trump on. That did so much more for the culture, 100%, like a billion times more than what Ben Shapiro says on his Daily Show. Like, I mean,
you're absolutely
that's
right.
100% correct. Like, if you see the comments on the Nelk Boy podcast, and they deleted it off YouTube, but like on TikTok, on Instagram, people saying like, you know what, I really hated Trump, but actually, I think I like him. I'm going to vote for him because our country's in shambles right now. That does so much more. But they're just a bunch of boys who do pranks, right? And so that's how we take back culture, and that's how we create culture and influence the next generation.
What do you think resonates more with, let's say, the Zoomer generation, right? Is it hearing sound bites of Ketanji Jackson Brown?
Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Ketanji.
You know, saying that she can't define what a woman is, knowing that she was the judge for the Pizzagate sentencing of the guy who shot up Pizzagate. Or is it Billie Eilish talking about how bad porn was for her? Like, what do you think resonates more with, millennials and Zoomers?
Billie Eilish, 100%.
Yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't
Nobody-
think
the
really
only-
anybody cares about Supreme Court justice nominees.
The only people who cared about Ketanji saying that she can't define a woman was conservatives.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any.
But it's not surprising. Like, I
Yeah.
could have been sitting there. They would have asked her the question live, and I would have turned to the guy sitting next to me and be like, watch this. She's going to say she can't do it.
But I think, but then it's like, it's not one or the other, it's both, right? So for example, you can, because most people don't like want to get into the nitty gritty of foreign policy and tax policy and everything. Most people just want to be told what to do, told what to know, right? Because a lot of people have FOMO. And so, for example, when Ukraine became like the biggest thing in the news, no one could point to Ukraine on a map, right? But they're like, oh, everyone's talking about it. What should I know? And then so we should be able to inform them, right? And if we're not informing them, then the left is writing their own narrative. So we have to also be able to write our own narratives, but also leverage people who are very influential, like Addison Rae, for example. She's obviously a Trump supporter. It's just pretty quiet. But if we're able to leverage her and say like, hey, like,
Who is this?
Oh, she's one of the biggest TikTok influencers.
What does she do? Does she do like dances or something?
She dances on TikTok.
Yeah.
And then she eventually moved into like, she had a single out, maybe an album out, and then she turned into acting.
And she definitely is, right? Like, you know that for sure.
She went to a
She for
UFC
sure
fight
is. I
where
know people
Trump
who
was,
know
and
her.
then she like there's this whole like scandal. But the thing is, it didn't ruin her career because again, most people aren't super woke, and then so she saw her like talking to Trump. She's like, "I love you, Mr. Trump. It's such an honor," and all that stuff. Yeah.
It's so weird how like 5 years, because you think of like Joy Villa at the Grammys wearing like the MAGA dress or whatever, which is like kind of cringe looking back on it now, is like doesn't resonate with really anybody other than people who, you know, to be cliche, like middle America, people will be like, yeah, that's cool. But it's just like, okay, her music doesn't resonate. No one's ever heard anything she's ever done. But when you have someone like this Addison Rae, who is immensely popular and then has this sort of controversy around supporting Trump, but then doesn't lose any sort of money, sponsorships, or career, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, because like people just need to grow a backbone and speak out.
Yeah.
This is why I have such a big problem with a lot of Christian influencers, because they don't talk about what's going on in culture when literally kids are being like brainwashed and groomed to like become like sexual objects for these progressive social experiments. It's like they always just talk about themselves, right? Where a lot of big Christian influencer like not actually mommy bloggers are better at this, but like just like the ones who are like have huge platforms, they always talk about, I struggled with this today. And I'm like, here's the thing. Stop talking about what you struggled with, because if you focus on what the world is actually, what's going on in the world and those around you, then you don't have time to worry about what you're struggling with.
I say that all the time to women when it comes to anxiety and being fat and all that. That's the same thing I tell them.
100%. There's this whole like cult around like self-care. It's like, I need to take care of myself. It's like, okay, yes, like set boundaries for yourself for sure. But the reason why you're struggling so much mentally and like emotionally, and you have so much anxiety and depression, is because you think of yourself. So here's the thing. There's a saying that humility is not thinking of yourself, it's thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less. And people need to stop thinking of themselves so much and about their own problems. They need to start thinking about how they can better their family, those around them, help their community, take back the culture. And as a Christian, I believe, take back souls for the kingdom of God. Yeah. And this is what the mission should be. But the problem is they always think about themselves. They evade cultural issues. And then they go like, oh, I'm so sad. But they have such a big platform. And on top of that, I'm sure they're scared of losing sponsors, because they have a lot of sponsors who like support LGBTQ stuff. But the reality is, even if you speak out, you'll maybe lose a few sponsors. But again, most people don't care. So your life won't be ruined. Your career won't be ruined. Right. So speak out now when we have a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're at a point almost now where if you do get canceled or if you do get in trouble for standing up for what you believe in, you actually gain more out of it in the end than you would lose, because because here's the thing about, I'm not even going to use the word conservative, but like anti-woke people, is that they're pretty loyal. You know what I mean? They'll come forward and they'll support people. So if you're an influencer or a celebrity, I mean, I can't tell you, when I was working for Candace, like how many A-list celebrities would reach out to her and secretly say that they support her. And I'm like, what are you doing? These are people who they could come out and
blow
say,
your lid off.
For real. Yeah. They could come out and say that they love Trump more than they love their mother, and they still wouldn't get canceled. Like that's how A-list they are. But everyone's just so terrified. It's really pathetic.
I have a question for both of y'all. You own your own social media platform. Yes or no question. Do you ban someone if that person cries on camera and then posts it?
Wait, do I ban someone? What do you mean? Like
If you post a video of yourself crying, to me, that's a bannable offense. You're gone.
Oh, for sure, because that's a sign of mental illness.
Okay, well, I'd say there's a little more nuance. I hate that word, but it's because, like, for example, like if you're crying and then you record yourself crying, it's like, okay, get over it yourself. But there's times when you're actually sharing a story or talking about like maybe like how you regret abortion and then you start crying, and it's like I think that's totally okay, and I think that's even powerful.
Yeah, I think that's different, but it's not like
I ban you.
Oh, even when someone does that?
Yes. Don't cry on social media. I'm sorry.
You almost cried in one of our episodes.
When
we were talking about Arrival.
Yeah, not social media. YouTube, long form conversation.
YouTube's not social media?
YouTube's 100% social media.
YouTube's social media.
YouTube is a social. YouTube is a platform.
It's social media.
It's
well,
social media.
I guess so. Everything else is a platform. But I mean, I could have put that video on Vimeo.
Social media.
Yeah, it's still social media.
Yeah,
so
but I didn't cry. I just choked up a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I've done that when I did PragerU's Stories of Us video. I choked up too and cried a little.
It's different when it's different when two people are talking to each other. I'm talking about the people who get in their car, put the hands free and start crying.
Yeah.
But there's 100% a difference between people who are crying already and then they record. Like, you see those videos of girls who, like, after they break up, they like are already crying and then they take all these angles of them on the wall and crying and falling. It's like,
that's
okay,
the
like
self-obsession.
Yeah, that's 100% the self-obsession. But like, for example, like I said, there's there's a lot of stories of people, let's say, for example, who transitioned when they're really young and then they regretted it and then detransitioned, right? And it's a very emotional and even traumatic thing for them because they're forced to take hormones and puberty blockers and things like that when they're so young. So then when they talk about it, they can't help but cry.
Yeah.
I think that's totally okay.
Yeah. What's the one issue, I guess we could say political issue, that you think people have been most brainwashed about?
Most brainwashed?
Oh, I have an answer, but I want to hear yours first.
There's so many because there's a new moral panic every year.
You're at the Woke Awards and you're presenting most brainwashed.
Most brainwashed? Oh, frick, man.
The Woke Awards?
Yeah. We should start the Woke Awards.
That wouldn't be so bad.
Most brainwashed? I think...
I would even go way past like LGBTQ stuff. I'd say COVID for sure.
Okay.
I would say COVID stuff.
That's definitely up there.
In terms of most brainwashed, I would say COVID. I think the one issue I'm the most passionate about is abortion.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely COVID is probably the one where most people were brainwashed.
Yeah.
Because without thinking, they just like masked up.
Yep.
And they're like, this is what I need to do to protect grandma. And it's like, dude, like I still have so many people and friends from LA who mask up everywhere they go. And I'm like, it's been over 2 years.
Even out here, you'd see the occasional person outside walking around with a mask on.
Well,
I always want to just go up to him and be like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Or like driving in their car by themselves.
Oh,
that one's just...
It's a big cope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My answer would be abortion. I think that's the most that people have ever been brainwashed about, especially women. It's incredible to me how, and I was one of them. I say that because I was one of them. And I think that I actually have, out of all my friends from all the different phases of life, there are very few friends that I have that are anti-abortion. And I don't use the terms pro-choice and pro-life because those are propaganda terms and they're not two sides of the same coin. Because pro-choice, what do you mean pro-choice? That's like saying that you're pro-choice because you think a man should have the choice to rape a woman. You know what I mean? But out of all of my friends that I've met in different walks of life, I have very few that are actually anti-abortion. And it's because they cannot get over this idea that a woman shouldn't have. They really think it's about bodily autonomy. And it's something that it's so hard. It's really hard to get women out of that mindset. Mm-hmm. I mean, men too, because they think that a woman should have the right to choose. I mean, when we were at the Blexit rally, we have friends and people who are, I guess, conservative or conservative adjacent, or at least anti-woke, who are still pro-abortion because they think that women should have the right to choose.
And that's the thing about this whole movement that I've seen. And for the most part, like, there's a lot of people who accuse me of grifting, but I'm like, dude, I literally lost my job and most of my friends over this. So it's like, it's not like I wanted that. But the reality is there are a lot of MAGA grifters in this movement, and a lot of people who just do it for clout. And they don't really care about families. They don't really care about people.
Gina, big time grift.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm making so much money off of this free podcast because of it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But it's people who don't really care about the cause, but they only care about owning libs. and getting clout from owning libs, right? So they don't really care about families. They don't really care about marriage. They don't care about babies, and because the reality is an abortion is the murder of a child. That's exactly what it is. And so if that's true, and we're killing over, like not killing, murdering, mutilating, starving to death, selling their body parts for profit,
dismembering them,
it's disgusting. We're doing that 2,000 of them every single day.
Yeah.
And nearly 1 million or over 1 million, depending on the year, every single year. It's disgusting. And then we have the audacity to talk about democracy overseas. Like, give me a break. We're killing our babies every single day.
Are there any countries that have strict anti-abortion laws?
I think Nepal actually has some really strict.
Poland also outlawed
Yeah.
abortion.
I think I remember hearing about Poland.
Except for the instances of rape and incest, that should still be outlawed.
Yeah.
Because it still doesn't justify killing a child.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, the reality is that's why you have a lot of pro-choice conservatives, because you're not really conservative. You're not conserving the baby's life and the right to life. But like you said, like there's this idea that this is why I don't like libertarians. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great libertarians out there, but for the most part, I don't like lawbitarians, because they have their only value is maximum personal autonomy, maximum bodily autonomy.
Yes.
I want to do whatever the heck I want because I have the right to do that. It's like, no, you don't have the right to, introduce drugs into your community, even if you think it's only affecting yourself, because the reality is the non-aggression principle is the cope, because we live in a society. We live in a society where we live with other people, and the reality is people want to be part of a community. People want to feel like they belong. And so this is why, again, 5 years ago, I warned about this. Even when I was a little more liberal, I was still a Christian. And so I warned about this, that when Obergefell was passed in 2015, that this is, the slippery slope is real, and this will be the impetus for normalizing pedophilia, because again, there is no, it's just what I'm doing with me and my family and in the bedroom. Like, it doesn't affect you, because the reality is it does. And so we see that today. Now Disney's trying to groom our children. There's tons of teachers and Hollywood and Democrats pissed off that they can't talk about sex to children in Florida, and kindergartners in Florida. And the reality is we live in a society. So that's why the whole leave me alone, I'll do me, you do you, live and let live, it just doesn't work.
It's completely antithetical to true conservatism. So I've mentioned Edmund Burke on the show before, because I'm reading one of his books, a book about him right now. And he's nicknamed, I think, the first conservative or the original conservative. And his thought process is very similar to that. We are a part of a social order. So the social order is a term that he uses a lot in his texts. And he talks about how every decision that we make, this obsession with individual personal autonomy, which kind of arose from the Enlightenment, like it's not something that we should base our decisions off of, because the decisions that you make, including behind closed doors, they have a massive impact on society, and they have a massive impact on our culture. And so it really comes down to the question, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to give people as much freedom as possible? Because liberty, when you actually read about what the founding fathers wanted for this country and what they had in mind when they wrote the Constitution, is that freedom does not mean that you can just do whatever you want. Liberty does not mean you can do whatever you want. Liberty means that you have the chance to do what you ought to do. Liberty gives you the chance to do what is best for society, because what they're actually trying to do, and Bryson talked about this recently, I think in one of his lives, is that founding fathers, they wrote the founding documents for a moral and a religious people. That's what they did. They didn't write it so that you could watch porn all day and you could do all the drugs that you wanted because you're not hurting anybody, right? That's not what liberty and freedom is. And so I think even a lot of conservatives don't understand what true liberty means, because the choices that we make, they have a very real impact. And if we're going to be asking the question, what are we really trying to do here? Are we really trying to give each other as much freedom as possible? Or are we trying to build the best society that we can possibly build? And the answer should be the latter, because if we're trying to build the best possible society that we can build, that means that the most amount of people are going to end up living the best life that they can possibly be living. So I think that that's a massive misconception, is that this idea of liberty, and Michael Knowles says this all the time, liberty does not mean licentiousness. And that comes a lot from Edmund Burke.
100%.
What's the Obergefell thing that you were talking about?
Oh, the Supreme Court case that legalized same-sex unions throughout 50 states. And I'm very careful when I talk about marriage, because same-sex unions are not marriage. This is so many people give me crap. They're like, you're gatekeeping definition of marriage. That's exactly what I'm doing. Because like marriage is it's a covenant between one man and one woman, acknowledged by a higher source. So you can say the state, but ultimately God, right? So it's like, if it's two men, it's not a marriage. If it's two women, it's not a marriage. If it's I don't know, like 10 people all having an orgy. Sorry if that's kind of explicit, but like that's not marriage. Like it's a marriage is between one man and one woman.
So what is the response to the state shouldn't be involved in it?
No, they absolutely should be involved. What are you talking about? The reason why there's so much fatherlessness is because the state was involved in a certain way. But we should want to leverage the state and wield political power to protect families. Like I don't understand with this idea like oh, the state should stay out of the family. The whole point of the state is to promote the good and to have order in society.
That's right.
And so there's this like binary that keeps happening. It's like either you're small government or big government. It's like, no, conservatism, it's like we're talking about, it's not about the quantity of government, it's about the quality and the use of government. So there's certain areas where the government should be, and there's certain areas the government should not be involved in. For example, the government should absolutely be involved in protecting children. So CPS, I think, is a good thing. And if it's actually used to protect children from abuse, like being forced to transition and things like that, that'd be a good thing. But right now it's being used against children. Yeah. So for example, if there's a family that's abusing their child, beating them up, absolutely the state should come in and arrest the parents and protect the child. But then there's another area, for example, let's talk about the pandemic, where no, the government absolutely should not be forcing you to inject yourself with certain chemicals because that's not the job of the state.
Yeah.
And then so this is where conservatives don't have any prudence, they don't have wisdom, they don't understand that yes, we can wield political power for the good of the people. Wielding power in and of itself is not wrong. That's right. It's not amoral. You see in the Bible where God uses kings and queens and uses people like Esther, raises them up to lead people and to help protect his people, right? So it's like, yes, we should want our leaders to do something to protect not only the civil liberties of the people, but also promote the good and the just and to embrace virtue. That's what it's about. And this is why, again, like I used to be a very libertarian. I used to be like, yeah, small government, government out of my lives. But the reality is, the left understands power politics, and that's why they're able to leverage government and use government. A winning message isn't, this small government, like government shouldn't do anything. A winning message is, yes, let's take back the government and use it to protect families and protect children and to stop the crazy moral rot that has infected every sphere of society and to bring back sanity. Because most people are looking at Leah Thomas destroying women with his huge broad shoulders, his muscle mass, his bone density. They're not looking at that and saying, yeah, that's a good thing. Most people are looking at that. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
And that's what the founding fathers had in mind too. They didn't imagine this small government that didn't really interfere in your life at all. And this is another misconception that conservatives had, including myself. I used to think this too. And not that long ago, I used to think, though, the government shouldn't do anything except protect and preserve your rights. But reading a lot of Edmund Burke, again, he talks a lot about natural aristocracy and how the government actually should be there with the goal of creating the most moral society that they can, right? To lead culture and society in a way that's going to move us forward in a good and a moral way. And so that's why the question is not whether we should have small government. The question is who is in power. And it's also a question of, and Edmund Burke says this a lot, that the people who are in power, people who are part of this natural aristocracy, they have an obligation and a responsibility to be good moral people. And that's something that we just don't even acknowledge now.
Isn't there a country that exists where if you're married, they will give you money for having kids, almost like a tax credit thing, how they do with like child care tax credits or whatever. I think, and you know how, let's say single parent households who live off welfare, the more children they have, the more money they're able to get from the government. I think there are some governments out there that actually incentivize getting married and having kids.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Too.
And if done well, that could be a very good thing. Like, for example, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, if you want to outlaw abortion, then you should outlaw fathers leaving the mother. I'm like, yeah,
sure.
100%. Yeah. That's exactly what I want. Like, I don't want fathers to leave the mothers of their children and leave their children. And that's what we see so much in inner cities, and particularly in the Black community, where people have been incentivized in this community to leave their children, because if they leave their children, then their mothers get more money from the state. And so that's the kind of use of government that's awful and we should get rid of, but instead try to promote marriages and people staying together. Because again, we don't want the government to play daddy, but we want the government to protect families and protect the traditional American order that we used to have. And the system of self-governance that we have in our country, and a lot of people talk about, yeah, we're a self-governing republic, constitutional republic, yay. It only works with the moral and religious people. And that the religious and moral framework that the founding fathers had in mind was the word of God.
Yeah.
The reality is this country was a Christian nation. People always say, no, it's a freedom of religion. No, it's a Christian nation. It's literally, the First Amendment wasn't talking about the state shouldn't have any sort of religion. It was talking about the federal government.
Yeah.
9 out of the 13 first states had a state religion, all a form of Protestantism. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And especially when you think about the system of self-governance, like we cannot govern ourselves unless we are under the authority of God, because the nature of humans is to rule or to be ruled. That's 100% how we operate. That's exactly why even in the Bible, you see that God was like, I am your king. You don't need any kings. And all the Israelites were like, oh, no, we need a king. Give us a king. You see in every single culture. This is why communism never works either, right? Because you can't have a completely egalitarian, equal society because people always look to leaders. They always want to be ruled. We saw this with COVID too. Most people just want to be ruled. They're just like, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do, Fauci. Tell me what to do, Walensky and CDC. Because most people want to be ruled, and there's certain people who do rule. And so our priority should be to elect leaders who rule justly and with virtue. Because again, the reality is the nature of humans is to rule and be ruled. And so the only scenario where small government and self-governance really works is if you have people who submit to the authority and lordship of God. And even if you don't, acknowledging that the Christian framework was the moral foundation for this country, that is, for me personally, in my opinion, it's good enough to have social cohesion and keep our moral fabric intact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ideally, I would want you to submit your life to Christ because, again, ultimately what matters is your eternity. So
right.
yeah.
And so here's the thing about humans creating their own moral system, right? So I always say this, I say, you can't deny that traditional conservative values came from the Bible. They're biblical. They came from God. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be Christian to be conservative. It doesn't mean that you have to be Christian to appreciate traditional conservative values, but it doesn't mean that you have to acknowledge that that's objectively where they came from. And so when we talk about moral relativism, where, leftists want to create a world where we set up our own morals, right? They want to reject Christianity. They want to reject God's order. The problem is that when humans set a moral order, like the goalposts are constantly changing. The thing about submitting to God's moral order is that there's a sense of relief, and that's where the true freedom comes from, because you know exactly what's right and what's wrong. You know exactly what your boundaries are. I mean, it's even when you talk about like kids, like disciplining kids who have clear boundaries set by their parents, they're the happiest kids on the planet because they understand exactly where they stand. They understand where the edges are. They know what's right and what's wrong. And even when they get disciplined, whatever form of discipline, of appropriate discipline they get disciplined with, it's like they have a sense of relief afterwards because they understand the order of the world and life makes sense to them. And it's the same thing for just humans in general. If once we have a very clear moral order that's been given to us by God through Christian morals, it actually makes it much easier for us to live our lives, to build a society. But the problem is that people want to set their own morals. It's that phrase, not thy will be done, but my will be done. And I think that's the biggest problem now. And that's how we end up with just this big mess of moral relativism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think term limits too. I know I keep talking about that, but I don't think anyone should be able to be a congressperson for 30 years.
I think
Nancy Pelosi?
And even if you do find like that righteous moral leader, I think there should be some limits in there where they're able to, not to use the word in a negative way, but groom the next person that will be able to take over that sort of morality in that position. Just because, you absolute power corrupts absolutely. So someone who has a lot of power never wants to give that up. And then imagine, having it for 30 years.
What's the phrase, the saying from The Dark Knight Rises? You either live long enough to become the villain or you die the hero.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's like, and that's why it kind of applies.
Yeah, something like that.
If someone is in Congress for 30 years, I mean, it's only a matter of time before they, get corrupted.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why George Washington is such an amazing first president, because he didn't want to be a leader, but everyone saw him as a leader, and he had that humility.
He didn't want to be president.
And then and on top of that, he didn't term limits, like presidential term limits wasn't a thing when the country first started. But he was like, after 2 terms, he was like, I'm done. And that's what
was that? Was that the 18th Amendment or something? Like the 18th or the 21st Amendment?
Yeah, But like you said, I think, but more importantly than term limits, it's to weed out the federal bureaucracy and all these agencies.
Yeah.
Because these are unelected bureaucrats who have been in our government for so long, and they're the ones actually controlling all the politics. What legislators do, because the way that Congress moves is so slow. But the reason why there's such a drastic change in this country in the past year, after just 1 year of Biden being in office, it's because it's the federal agencies doing things. It's the ATF, it's the FDA, it's the EPA. It's all these agencies who have been in there for years and years and decades, who just are. That's what really I consider the swamp, more so than Nancy Pelosi. She's definitely part of the swamp.
Yeah.
But these people are the ones really controlling and pulling the strings behind the
Fauci's
scenes.
unelected.
Yeah, 100. How the heck has he been in office in his position for so long?
And he was the person with the most power.
Yeah,
for a long time.
exactly. We need to weed out these people. These are the most important people first to weed out and to have term limits on and fire.
Yeah.
Versus congressmen, in my opinion.
Should we bring back the old practice of whoever lost the presidential campaign was vice president? I think that ended in like 1803 or something like that. But that was the thing. Yeah, Trump would have been vice president right now.
Oh, I don't know. I just think Democrats are so psychotic that it's just there is no sane Democrat. Maybe Joe Manchin, but that's it. Christensen one, maybe.
Yeah, but what? Oh, do you want to do questions?
I feel like there are a lot of questions.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, a lot of people ask questions.
Questions from Instagram for Kangmin Lee.
Okay, perfect.
I said that good, right?
Yeah.
I said that good.
Yeah,
I said
ask him, not me.
Well, in Korean, it's like Kangmin.
Kangmin.
So there's like the closest is like Kangmin.
Kangmin.
And a lot of people, when they first meet me, they're like, Kangmin.
We were talking about how the last name Park.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's like, I don't know why they put the R in there.
Yeah, because it's Pak.
Pak. Yeah.
Okay, you ready?
Or Lee, because it's E in Korean. But
right.
It is what it is.
Wait, is it just L-E?
No, so in Korean, it's E.
But it's spelled L-E-E.
Oh, wait, so you don't say Lee?
So I don't say Lee. So my Korean name is Lee Kangmin.
Oh, nice.
It's weird how I'm sure it's in many other languages, how when you translate it into English letters or words, it's like Nguyen. We were saying the Vietnamese last name Nguyen.
N-G-Y-U-E-N.
How do you get that?
Okay, you ready?
Who knows? Yeah.
Here we go. Steven Zimmer 01 wants to know, what's your favorite meme?
Favorite meme? Oh, there's so many memes. But my favorite meme is Toby, emo Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3. You know what I'm talking
where he's
about?
crying, like kind of puckered up.
He literally like it's just all parts. Well, Tobey Maguire memes in general are my favorite memes. Just how like I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye, or like when he goes like "see you chump," or like he does his whole dance after he like buys a suit.
The dance is good.
I mean, it's just I could watch Tobey Maguire memes on YouTube for hours and not get bored of it. It's
Okay,
just
so I'll
funny.
put a Toby that. What is it? Emo Spider-Man?
Yeah, just Tobey Maguire.
I'll put it up
yeah.
right here.
Okay,
My
perfect.
favorite Tobey Maguire is the dancing one from Spider-Man 3.
So
It's
funny.
a good one.
Okay, next question from Natalender. I'm your opinion. Should all conservatives have the same? I think she means in your opinion, but she is your opinion. In your opinion, should all conservatives have the same fundamental values? That's a good question.
Yes, I think there are things we can disagree on in terms of the size and scope of government, tax policy, things like that, even some foreign policy. I do believe that if you're an authentic conservative, that you are American first, and especially foreign policy, where like you care about the needs of the American people before you care about any other people. Why I say that is because it's like, for example, if you saw a father taking care of other people's children more than his own children, you'll call him irresponsible and terrible. Why is it somehow a good thing for the president of the United States and our leaders to care for the people of Ukraine, care for the people of, I don't know, even Korea, as I'm saying this as a Korean, the people of Israel more than they do the people in our own United States. Like they care about the borders of Ukraine more than they do our own southern border. And that's a problem because drug overdoses, fentanyl overdose is the number one cause of death of adults from 18 to 45, which is a huge problem. And all these things are happening because of our poor southern border. Yes, trafficking, rape, horrific stuff. And they don't care about that because they don't care about the American people. And so I think in that regard, yeah, you have to be American first. To what extent you provide foreign aid, I think you can disagree about that. We can disagree about those nitty gritty things. I'm actually okay with the progressive tax policy as long as we can like do things like abolish abortion and have families intact. But I think in like fundamental values, we can't disagree on. So we can't disagree on what marriage is. We can't disagree on what constitutes a man, what constitutes a woman, what masculinity looks like, what femininity looks like, wanting to outlaw abortion. All these things that I think are just fundamental issues that if you compromise on, then it will ultimately lead to you tolerating the collapse and destruction of our society, which is what we see today.
Well said. Josh Tijerina wants to know, what denomination are you?
I am a non-denominational, kind of reformed, charismatic Christian.
Do you get into the vans to take you to church?
No.
What about the one in the office?
Yeah. This is a paper van.
It says Scranton Church, Alleluia.
I'm dead.
Yeah, we had a Korean church in my town growing up that it said like, it was maybe like Sunshine or something.
The van.
Yeah. In the sizzle reel, I'll just cut to that real quick. As often as possible, Kind wants to know, have you been to any protests? And if so, which was your favorite and why?
Protests? I've been to a few. I think mainly I've been to like abortion.
Like March for Life stuff?
Yeah, Supreme Court stuff.
How's the March for Life one? I hear it's huge.
It was good.
Yeah.
It's like, because like the thing is, like, our mainstream media on TikTok, on YouTube, and all these platforms on social media, even in your circles, your corporations, all make you think that you're such a fringe minority for being anti-abortion and pro-life, right? And it's like, no, it's like there are so many people from all walks of life, all different stages of life, all different cultures, backgrounds. It's just like they all want to see the atrocity of abortion end. Yeah. Which was so encouraging to me, because I'm like, wow, this many people from around the country that care about this cause, like, you're not alone. And so it was really powerful for me.
Why do they pick the coldest month to do that? They just pick
the anniversary of Roe v. Wade.
Okay. My own ignorance answered. Not necessarily for Kangmin, but aren't flat earthers trying to subvert objective reality too? Not if they believe it's their reality.
Well,
right?
here's the thing though, like, flat earth conspiracy theories, I think, is actually pretty fun. And I kind of look into it sometimes too. Yeah. They actually have pretty good arguments. Like, I'm not.
That's exactly what Savannah Hernandez said.
Yeah.
She
Right.
says they're pretty convincing.
Like, this is probably a terrible soundbite. People are like, oh, he's a flat earther. I'm not a flat earther. But it's like, it's those kind of things are honestly okay and fun to debate. Because again, here's the thing, like Galileo, right? Before then, like, everyone believed the earth, all planets and stars revolved around the earth. With science, we figured out that the earth actually revolves around the sun and all that stuff. And then maybe flat earthers might disagree. I haven't really gone down the rabbit hole. But that's the kind of stuff that if you disagree with, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay, because what? Like, it does affect NASA research. It affects like space exploration, fine, whatever. But like, it doesn't affect the day-to-day.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect your moral code. It doesn't affect how, even if you get on a plane to go to another country, you're still getting there.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't affect, it's just those kind of things are fun, and those things, kind of things are okay to talk about and disagree with. It's just objective reality as we know it and how it affects our society. So for example, a man cannot be a woman. Right. That kind of stuff is like, you cannot disagree with because you're destroying it. But I think there's a difference between objective, like trying to rewrite objective truth, and exploring science. Right. Because science in and of itself is the exploration of our observed reality. And since the dawn of humanity, the observed reality has been that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. That, yeah, even though their phenotype might not meet their genotype, which is a very, 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 very rare exception, we still see that as an exception. Because that's not the norm, and it shouldn't be normalized, right? Not saying we should treat them terribly, because that's not their fault, they have that, and we should treat them with dignity and love and respect. But to try to completely subvert and rewrite and destroy observed reality in and of itself, because inclusion, or because you believe in a postmodern framework, I think it's absurd. So I think flat earthers, like, it's fine, because like, honestly, I can't 100% confidently say that everything that, that
NASA has told you,
NASA told me is like 100% true.
Well, they say go deeper into like how much money NASA spends every year, just the amount of money that they spend every year, and Operation Paperclip of how, basically NASA was started by Nazi scientists. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, the flat Earth is one of those things that the more you listen to it, the more convinced you are, especially if they're not bringing in, let's say, mainstream scientists to try and refute them. But if it's just all flat earth conspiracy, I can understand how people get like way too into it.
Do you want to guess how much NASA spends in a fiscal year?
I'm going to say 97 billion.
I'm going to say 330 billion.
I wanted to say that too.
22.6 billion.
Okay.
It's actually less than I thought.
Less,
It
Yeah,
was.
but
less
that's
than I
still a
thought.
lot.
But
It's still a
still,
lot.
yeah. Yeah, there no moon. Should we abolish, this is from Janie Leal. Should we abolish or reform the education institutions? I mean, yeah,
That's a tough one. I think we should take it over.
So
That's my answer.
reform. Yeah.
Yeah,
reform.
reform. Yeah.
I agree.
That's a whole nother episode. Jake Zamora, number 2, wants to know, what's your favorite anime?
Oh man, yeah, this is easy. Attack on Titan.
Okay.
Because it's like it has none of the fan service in terms of like boobs and butts and things like that, but it's just such a powerful story that really touches on family. It touches on the human condition. It talks about power politics. It talks about how people interact, relationships, and I'll talk. It's just such a good show. And the funny thing is, it was written by a right-wing Japanese nationalist who is pretty nationalist
What's it called
himself.
again?
Attack on Titan. It's one of the most popular animes of all time.
Really?
And it's funny because, again, most people who watch anime are liberal, but they don't understand that actually Attack on Titan is very deeply right-wing.
Oh, interesting. Chrising wants to know, since you were in Minneapolis for a time, did you get to meet any, is it Hmong people? If so, how was that like?
Yeah, it's Hmong. It's
okay.
pronounced Hmong. Yeah, I have. It was very surprising because before then I've never met a Hmong person in my life.
I thought the M was silent. Like, why? But yeah, Hmong, yeah.
But yeah, most Asians in Minneapolis and in Minnesota are Hmong. Yeah.
So what is Hmong? Is that Mongolian or is
They're like a kind of Chinese people. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that were those the people that were portrayed in that Clint Eastwood movie
I'm not too
Oh,
with
I
the
know.
car Gran Torino?
Gran Torino.
Yeah, I think they were Hmong people.
Okay, probably.
Yeah.
I haven't watched that one. Yeah.
Let's see.
they were.
Jake Brick wants to know, which leftist policy / movement is most important to destroy, combat abortion. I guess you would probably say.
Number 1, abortion. Number 2, LGBTQ. All the race stuff, like 100% is important, but that all pales in comparison to those two.
Dude, Jon Stewart. I sent this to you, right? Jon Stewart has a show called The Problem with Jon Stewart, and he had a segment called The Problem with White People. Did you see this?
Yeah, I did.
Dude, what? And then
is that the one with the race to dinner?
yeah, this woman's organization was called Race to Dinner.
She's like morbidly obese.
But RACE to dinner, and she's morbidly obese. And I had to write, like, these people just write this themselves. Like, it's insane. But it was all just about 3 white people on a panel, with the exception of Andrew Sullivan. He was the only person who was kind of fighting back about this idea. It's like, America in 2022 is not a white supremacist state or system. I don't know why you guys keep on perpetuating this old talking point. And it's such a normie talking point that, like, white people, because even Jon Stewart was like, I'm going to echo something that Robin DiAngelo said, that when talking about race, we should be talking about this all the time, especially amongst ourselves as white people. And it's just like, dude, it's what Morgan Freeman said. You want to get rid of racism? Stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Even Steve Harvey was like, you want to get rid of racism? Let's just start doing stuff together. Like, the more we talk about racism and just being an inherent racist simply because you were born white or simply because you were born Asian does nothing to solve anything. All it does is keeps on extending the amount of time that racism can be talked about. It's absolutely asinine.
Well, if you look at because I think a large part of this is because if you see after Occupy Wall Street, the mentions of racism, white supremacy, privilege, patriarchy, all these things just shoot up in all social media platforms and newspapers and outlets. And it's because it's 100% a distraction, because our institutions of power, they were exposed during Occupy Wall Street, where the banks were bailing out all these major corporations, and federal money was just, the Federal Reserve was just printing out all this money for all these banks. And it's just really deep-rooted corruption. And so both left and right were coming together during Occupy Wall Street and saying, like, get rid of this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, right, that's great. But then they're like, okay, but how can we get these people distracted? And just, talk about how oppressed people are. Oh, perfect. Before Occupy Wall Street, this talk was like, no one talked about this stuff. It wasn't mainstream. Even in colleges, it wasn't even that prevalent. It was still in universities, but like most people didn't really care about it. And no one talked about it. And then somehow it became mainstream, and it's because a lot of this race, all these racial narratives and all these racial politics are 100% completely fabricated. I could say the N-word when I was growing up with all my black friends, and it was totally cool. And they'll call me chink, and it'd be totally cool. And we're like just having fun, getting to know each other. And despite that, we will still play basketball together. We still hang out. And then suddenly now we can't even apparently now if you're not black, you can't even talk about Will Smith and Chris Rock anymore. And it's 100% fabricated.
Yeah. I saw some girl started a tweet out. It was like, oh, the thing about Will Smith is, checked my hand. It's white. Guess I can't say anything. Did you post that?
She's very morbidly obese, so
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Oh, God. Okay.
It's so funny. You're going to hate it when I say this. You say a lot of the same exact things that Fic Nuenta says.
Oh, yeah.
Like many of the things that we've talked about already was really similar to the others. That's, I know you hate to be compared to him, but
I mean, the thing is, like, he goes overboard because he is an entertainer, and so he is intentionally provocative. But a lot of his political philosophy and a lot of what he believes about marriage and family and things like that is actually not it shouldn't be super controversial.
There's nothing controversial.
I just think his view of like what a wife should do is a little extreme, but for the most part, like how he feels about American first policy and about economics and foreign policy, how he feels about like just preserving the traditional American society.
Yeah.
It's like I used to really hate the guy. I used to really do because I really thought he was an anti-Semite. I really thought his jokes were offensive and a lot of his antics were not helpful. I still do agree some of it. Yeah, I think he definitely goes overboard, but for the most part, like I'm not gonna completely disavow him because the more that I learn is that when institutions, both like conservative and like left-wing ones with power, start to target a certain person, I feel like we should at least listen to that. For example, even the Ukraine thing, right? Both sides were condemning Russia and just like supporting Zelensky and glorifying Zelensky as some hero.
And we can't ask why.
Yeah, and like if you ask why, you're automatically pro-Putin. And I'm like, what? Yeah. Like literally, when I posted, because I didn't really post too much about my thoughts about Ukraine because I'm not a foreign policy expert, and honestly, I care more about what's happening in our borders and outside our borders. Although, yes, what happens outside our borders is important. I care about like the fact that we're killing 2,000 babies every day and that people are overdosing of fentanyl every day in this country. But I didn't really know too much about it. I'm not a huge foreign policy expert. But all I said is like, I know a lot of these things are fake. I was like, everyone just take a chill pill. The mainstream media has lied to you about everything in the past 2 years, 3 years, even. And they've been wrong about every single foreign policy thing in the past 50 years.
Yeah.
Don't trust these people. At least take a step back and be sober-minded. And everyone was saying, how could you? Yeah. Are you saying Ukrainians aren't dying? Are you supporting Putin? You are pro-Russian propaganda. I was like, oh my god. No,
they're exhausting. I'm telling you, this is why universal voting rights was such a massive mistake because most people are just retarded.
Yo, 100%. Not everyone should vote. And here's the thing, like I do believe that we should put limitations on voting because if everyone votes and if you don't know what you're talking about, then you're actually destroying your country and destroying yourself.
This is how we end up with this.
Yeah, 100%.
2 more questions. Saving the best for last. Niston is a frequent questionnaire of the show. What can we do to get the country to remember our founding values? Is it too late?
I think
we touched on this a little bit.
I think here's the thing. I believe that no one is too far from the grace of God, but at the same time, we're talking about political solutions and cultural solutions in terms of what we can do. I do believe that most of the left wing are completely far gone because to them this is a religious thing. They want to set up a new woke religious order. Yeah. That's what they want to do, and they're completely sold out for that cause. I do believe that we need to take back the people who are in the middle. And that's the majority of Americans. We need to take those people back and convince them and write our own narratives and show them like, yeah, abortion is wrong. Yeah, a lot of this LGBTQ stuff is actually just made to groom your children, teach them about the history of John Money and what he did, and talk about why this country is so great, what made this country so great, which is, in my opinion, Christianity, which led to strong families and strong communities and a strong moral order in this country. But to take back those people. And I think that's ultimately what we can do. But ultimately, I say this all the time, that conservatism without Christ is just progressivism without the speed limit. A lot of people say like conservatism without blah, blah, it's just, oh, it's the speed limit. No, it's like without Christ, it's going the speed limit. And again, you don't have to be Christian to be a conservative. I say this all the time, but you have to acknowledge that what made America great was the fact that it was a Christian nation built on the idea of governing ourselves because our ultimate authority is not the state. Our ultimate authority is God, and the state is only a vehicle and tool used to preserve that moral, the moral order and the commandments and the framework and the boundaries that God has set in His word, in the Word of God. But I say this all the time. Like I said, conservatism without Christ is progressivism going the speed limit. So we need Christ. We need repentance and revival in this country if we were ever to see us like stay a country If not, we will devolve into civil war. And so I really do believe that we need Jesus, and we need like people to really speak out and share the gospel and be the light and salt and light of this world, because the gospel isn't just saying Jesus loves you on TikTok. You have to tell them of their sin. You have to say that, hey, you are in the wrong. But here's the thing. Even though you're dead in your sin, although you are far from God, because he is a holy and just God, he sent his one and only son to die for you. And that story is very powerful. And that's why, I hate the phrase facts don't care about your feelings, because while it's true, what really mobilizes people and wakes people up are feelings, are emotions. And the strongest narrative, the strongest story that we can tell is the story of redemption and love and grace that Christ has shown us on that cross. So that's, I believe, the number one way we can take back this country.
He's going to make me cry.
Okay, three more questions.
No,
Go
wait.
ahead.
I know. I just want to say really quick, because I think that it's so powerful to talk about that publicly, because I think that there are a lot of people, it's strange because a lot of people, it's easy for us to talk about politics and abortion, whatever. But for some reason, it can be really, really hard to talk about what Christ has given us and the redemption and the salvation that comes from that story. I mean, that is like the true hero's journey. You know what I mean? So I think that there's something really, really powerful there. There's something you said. Oh, this is what I remember. So you were talking about how it's important to tell people and talk about what it means to be dead in your sin. And one of my favorite moments of you online was how you responded to Dave Rubin's, and you were talking about how we don't want to say his husband. And I make a mistake of doing that. I'm someone who doesn't like to call William Thomas Leah Thomas, but sometimes I get caught up, but I called Dave Rubin and his husband. But Dave Rubin and David Janet, the way that you responded to their 2 children coming via surrogacy, I thought you had the best response to that, because there's sort of like 2 extremes, right? There's one extreme on the conservative end where they're glorifying it and they're praising it and they're saying, congratulations, this is such a blessing. I can't tell you how many conservatives I saw comment and say, this is such a blessing. I'm like, is this a blessing though? But then there's the other extreme of where we don't need to be nasty. We don't need to be rude. We don't need to berate them and call them names and treat them in an undignified way. But we do need to say, this is not right. This is not okay. And this is not something that we should celebrate as conservatives, and I think we actually need more of that. And we need to do it and this is the most difficult part, we need to do it in a loving way, because you can still be loving and kind to Dave and David and to people who are making those kinds of choices, but you can still be honest about what's true and what's right. And I think we're missing that.
Yep, 100%.
Okay, you ready for the other question? I got 3 more. I know I said 2 more, but let's do 3 more.
We got a lot of questions
we have
for
Joseph Ramos.
He's another good
here.
friend of the show.
Yeah, he wants to know, why did your people make K-pop? Whose fault is this? And then he asks, how does a country with mandatory drafts produce K-pop?
Okay, here's the misconception that a lot of people have about Korean culture. So I was on Bryson's podcast yesterday, and a lot of people were saying, "Who is this gay guy?" Who is this? This guy is definitely a closeted homosexual, and they're talking about me. There's this misconception that Korean men are like
feminine
and effeminate, and they're like basically they're cucked and they're whipped, right? The reality is that they're not. They're actually very dominant, and sometimes it's to the extreme where they are very abusive towards women.
Yes.
But they're actually very dominant and alpha. And so yes, like Korean guys might wear makeup, might do their hair, might dress a certain way, and present themselves in a certain way. But if you go to Korea, most people aren't gay. Like, they're not gay, and most of them don't like that stuff. It's kind of being more normalized. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, they elected a new conservative president. They're calling him the Korean Trump, which is really great, because there's a huge anti-feminist wave happening in Korea among young men. But these same young men are kind of like the same ones that kind of look like me, a little more like pretty boy type. And the reality is, like, K-pop, it's kind of like still a manifestation of that, of like, they might still like do the finger hearts and the winks and things like that, but they're actually pretty like masculine in that, like, they are very assertive and dominant and like that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of like a misconception. I kind of maybe say this as someone who's Korean, grew up in Korea. I didn't grow up in Korea, but I went to Korea a lot growing up. My family's deeply Korean. I go home and I only speak Korean, and I also do enjoy listening to K-pop. Mm-hmm. So I do think it's becoming a little more degenerate because of the influence of Western culture on Korean culture and Korean entertainment and Korean music. But definitely old school K-pop. Like, you guys should listen to old school K-pop, old school Korean rap, old school Korean pop and Korean rock and things like that, because it's really, really good.
So would you say that masculinity, that there can be a spectrum of masculinity, or it's just defined in different ways by different cultures?
Yeah, I think it looks different in different ways in terms of aesthetically, but I think it boils down to being masculinity really boils down to fulfilling your role that God has given you to be a provider and protector in society, to lead, right? And so what does it mean to be masculine? Really means to have strength under control. That's what Jesus had, right? Strength under control. And I just always tell people to look to Jesus in terms of what it means to be masculine, because he was the epitome of masculine perfection.
Yeah.
He was loving, he was kind, but he's also strong.
Yep.
He didn't mince words. He was unapologetic about what he said. He said a lot of offensive things, but he was also very kind and he was loving. And he still reached out to the brokenhearted and even the prostitute and the tax collectors. And so that's what I say. Because, like, for example, I know a lot of conservative women don't find me particularly attractive. I can't grow a beard. I'm sorry. My ancestors ate soy. Like, it's not my fault. I can't grow a beard. I don't have that. I'm not like super tall and super built. I do work out, but it's not like I don't want to be super buff and jacked out and things like that. But really, masculinity, I do believe that physical discipline is a part of it, because again, like, it's about being strong and having that strength under control, not to be bitter, not to be abusive, being slow to anger, but also not being afraid to have righteous anger for the things that matter, and standing up for your children, for your woman, and also for
and wielding
society.
Power in a very positive and good way. I think that's a
Yes.
huge masculine trait, is wielding power in a way that's going to bring good to people.
Yes, 100%.
Last two come from, oh my gosh, Josh, 47. He wants to know, how many Asian hate crimes do you experience on an average day?
0, but yeah, it's definitely, I mean, we all know it's not from white people. So
Lol.
What this one's for you, Gina. What does Gina think about people calling God their best friend?
Well, there is a lot of scripture of how God talks about how he offers the most fulfilling friendship. But I mean, I think that in a way that God can provide the deepest and most fulfilling friendship in your life. I mean, he's ultimately more than that. He's our savior, and he's our leader and our God and our Lord. But I mean, I don't see anything wrong with calling him a friend or a best friend, because there is plenty of scripture that where God is laid out as a best friend.
right.
If you missed this, people were up in a little tizzy about us not wanting to refer to our spouse as our best friend.
I actually agree with that, and why I say that is because you don't treat your spouse like you treat your best friend.
That's exactly what
you
we
treat them
said.
differently, right? It's like, it's a different relationship. They should be closer to you than your best friend.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're not just a friend, because again, that assumes that you guys have equal roles. Because friends, you guys do the same thing, but in a marriage, you don't. Yes, but they are supposed to be closer to you. They're supposed to be closer to you than your best friend is. But also, you guys play different roles.
A lot of people are saying you're looking into it too deep. They can't. And I'm just saying, the whole point, of course, we're looking into it very deeply, just because the whole point of a spouse is to have someone that goes past any sort of friend relationship. You don't raise kids, with your friends. You don't plan on the house that you're going to buy with your friends. You don't, plan on how you're going to take care of your parents with your friends together when they're elderly or if they're dying. You don't plan for these things with your friends. You can talk about it with your friends. You can get advice from your friends about it. But ultimately, that spouse, whether it's your wife or your husband, is probably going to be the most important person in your life. And I think it's just degrading to call that person a best friend.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's like, when you get married, you become one flesh.
Mm-hmm.
So they're almost like you, like not you, but I'm not saying that in like
You're
a mystical
one.
sense, but
Yeah.
you're one. So
You're one.
it's like, you don't say that with your best friend. You don't treat your best friend or your friends like they're like literally your like everything.
Yeah.
And that's how you should treat
It can
your spouse.
feel like when I'm hanging out with my wife on the couch and we're watching TV or we're talking, it could feel like I'm hanging out with my best friend. You know what I mean? Like that sort of camaraderie and just how well we get along, just in the fun that we have. Yeah, I understand how people can misconstrue that and be like, your wife's not your best friend. It's like, no, I have an awesome time with her, but it's just that time is so much deeper than I can have with any of my best friends.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Like, you should enjoy spending time with your spouse. You should have fun with them. Absolutely. Well, they're not your best friend. And this is where like, it's like people say it's like a big deal. And I'm like, not a big deal. And I'm like, okay, to a certain extent, I agree with you. But at the same time, it's because you guys are buying into the left's a whole rewriting of language, because language affects how we perceive reality.
Yeah.
And then so they understand how to use language to change culture and change the hearts and minds of people.
Yeah.
We just look at that as like, that's not a big deal. Let's just use the correct pronouns for that person if they just want to. No, we can't. And we can't buy into this. And this actually, I want to touch on one thing, Gina, you said earlier, that God, yes, he is our friend, but he is our Lord. And so one thing that evangelical Christians and Christians at large just in this country have lost is reverence for God. And this is why I love Francis Chan. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a speaker, but he talks about this all the time, the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord. And the Christians always say, oh no, that fear of the Lord is just about like being respectful for God. It's like, no, it's talking about trembling at the thought of God. Like Francis Chan said it this way when he was talking about Isaiah 6, when the prophet Isaiah had a vision about the throne room of God. And Isaiah fell flat on his face and was like, depart from me, O Lord, for I am a man of unclean lips. Like, I am wicked. I don't even deserve to be. Holy crap, right? And Francis Chan said when he was speaking at a church, he said, if God ripped off the roof of this building and just showed himself in his full might and glory, what would you do? Would you say, oh, Jesus, you're so loving? Or would you be like, holy crap? No, 100% we'd say, holy crap. We'd fall flat on our face and be like, Lord, Lord, Lord. And that's the kind of mindset we need to have when we think about God. And that view of God makes you love him even more and appreciate him even more.
It makes you want to follow him more. And,
exactly.
and obey
it makes
him.
you obey him more. It makes you appreciate the gospel, Jesus' sacrifice on the cross even more. But we've lost that reverence. And then we've kind of belittled God into this little, he's my best friend. He's my buddy. I'm just going to lie down and be like, what's up, God? And to a certain extent, yeah, you can do that with him. But at the same time, it's like, no, he is your Lord.
You sound like a Hillsong preacher.
No, and that's the problem with Hillsong. I think a lot of leaders in Hillsong are actually very good. I really do like them, but because it's so decentralized and because they have so much money, there's a lot of corruption in that.
Yeah.
And so they want to appease culture and they don't want to say things. But again, we have to go back to revering God and fearing God because he is mighty. He is just. He is wrathful, but he is also full of love, full of grace. And if you understand this, then that makes you appreciate him so much even more, that like a God like him, the God of the universe, would send his one and only son to die on a cross for you.
For each and every one of us. Yeah.
How crazy is that?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And he loves you and he knows your needs and he knows your desires. He knows every single hair on your head.
I think for every guest, just to troll the viewers to some extent, we should ask them at some point, do you think your spouse should be your best friend?
Because
like people are in the comments, episode 100, I can't believe they asked Trump if they think Melania is his best friend. Like, like Mike, give it up already. Like, I really want to get to that point.
Such a good one,
I'm telling you, every episode we ask the
we've
guest
already
that.
had comments where like, these guys are trying to justify their own opinions. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's what
Now
you
it's
do with
gonna
your
be a thing.
opinion.
That's what you do. You share your opinions.
Yeah, exactly.
And try to get people to share your opinions, right? There's this whole idea. It's like, oh, don't shove your opinions or impose your beliefs on other people. No, that's absolutely what we should do.
Yeah.
What a great guest.
Yeah, this was a great episode. I mean, I wish we could go longer.
Kamsahamnida.
Kamsahamnida. Tell everybody where to find you.
Yes.
Yeah, I am on all platforms: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, everywhere. Just the Kangmin Lee, KNGMINLEE.
And your backup, because I couldn't tag your main
Yeah,
account.
my backup is like I just add an underscore after it.
It's true.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right,
you for
guys.
tuning in, everyone. Click like, subscribe, share,
Do all that.
and all the good stuff. I hope you enjoyed those cookies. I gotta empty my